A very good morning from a rather grey and dreary A66 about 15 miles to the east of Penrith. And today's video, wanting to reinforce, reiterate, revisit what has been said here on markvoneweather.com for the last several weeks here, laying down the ideas and giving backdrop, reasoning behind why I think that we're going towards a cold end to November and a cold, at least, first half of winter. Now, there's not been much mention of a winter forecast. Folks have been holding back. I want to get this one right. And quite frankly, if it's a bust, there's a part of me that would almost be inclined to throw in the towel when it comes to long range forecasting. This will be the upcoming. This upcoming winter will be my 12th winter forecast in a row, and there has been some crackers. Arguably, the very first one, the 2009-10 winter forecast, was a dream. I called for the coldest winter in some 30 odd years, based on the solar cycle and based on sea surface temperatures and whatnot. And it got me into the papers for actually beating the Met Office. It was the Scottish Daily Mail that published an article about my winter forecast. And I don't even have a hard copy of that. Actually, I kind of wish I did, but I've moved a couple of times since then, and I don't actually have a copy of that article. Looking back at the 09-10 winter forecast that I produced, there has been some big busts as well, but I do believe that we are in a position, folks, that we are revisiting, or at least all the parameters. 99% of the parameters are pretty much bang on in line with 2010. And we know what happened in 2010. We had a turn to a very cold second half of November. We had arguably the coldest December in a generation, and at least 100 years of records for the British Isles. And then we turned the winter on its head. It was a milder January, February, and on into March period here. And the golden question is, I do believe that we are going to see a turn to colder. The modelling is becoming more and more fixed on that idea. But the golden question is, with the coming of cold, how strong, how long does it last? Do we get the cold then to continue, albeit possibly broken up? You don't often have a prolonged, sustained period of bitter cold, for weeks on end in the UK. It tends to break. We've seen that in 2009-10 as well. And then it comes back, and that kind of wish from the atmosphere just wants to remain cold. It wants to continuously snow. Are we going to get that in winter 21-22? That is going to be the big question. But let's revisit the basics. Solar cycle, very, very, very similar to what it was in 2010 here. So you can see the idea. This is about 2021 here. And if you look back to 2010, we're almost bang in line with that in terms of sunspot numbers, and also the energy released from those sunspots are fairly comparable to 2010 as well. So we've got that in our favour. Number one, sea surface temperatures. You look back at some of the posts that I've produced. When you've got a warm North Pacific, it tends to increase the chance of an Alaskan block and high. That then tends to lead to incursions of bitterly cold air into eastern North America. But in turn, that tends to fire up the Atlantic jet stream and bring, in essence, much more Atlantic influence as opposed to colder influence on the British Isles. We've seen that during the mid 2010s, and that also coincided, of course, with the solar maximum. We're back to where we were in 2010, roughly. We've got the cold North Pacific. The overall PDO, Pacific Decadal Oscillation, is in a cold phase. We've almost got that horseshoe of cold extending from the North Pacific into the central tropical Pacific. We've got a warm North Atlantic. Now, granted, one of the big concerns that I've got is that the Atlantic is not like 2010 in terms of we don't have that ribbon of cold extending off Newfoundland into the central Atlantic here. But arguably, what you could say is that it's less warm to the south of Greenland and Iceland, and we've got warmer than normal, stronger warmth to the north of the UK and Iceland. We've also got exceptionally warm water over Hudson Bay here and around the northeastern half of the United States and within the St. Lawrence Bay. So what is interesting, that then tells me that we're more likely to see an Aleutian low, not high, focus itself kind of to the south of Alaska here. What that then does, it allows the atmosphere to focus more on Atlantic block, and when you've got the warm Pacific, that kind of distorts the atmosphere downstream. But I think there is a good indication that that the sea surface temperatures are in a very favourable position. Of course, 2009-10 we had an El Nino in place here, or you could argue, a 2009-10 style winter. But the big difference with that, folks, is that we've got a La Nina in place, not an El Nino here. But it's going to be interesting to see. Also notice the warm waters here extending from Japan and the Koreas out towards the central North Pacific. That would indicate high pressure more over the western portion of the North Pacific, and then the negative here to the south of Alaska here. That would all allow a little bit more favorability in terms of North Atlantic blocking high pressure here. So that's just my overall opinion. That is my understanding of sea surface temperatures here. Let's look at the other parameters here. And we've got a lot of things going for us this winter. Let me just try and drag this along here. So the IOD, the Indian Ocean Dipole, it's been negative during the course of the summertime, extending through much of the autumn, starting to try and come back up. But of course, when we had the very warm 2019-2020 winter, we had the opposite. We had a very strong positive IOD, and that would, of course, correlate to the potential for a record strong stratospheric polar vortex. The Arctic sea ice is pretty much at a 10-year high, as you can see here. Continues to do well, so big recovery here. The quasi-biennial oscillation, by the way, last time it was very strongly negative. We've seen the beast from the east, the end of February, beginning of March, and you can see here that we continue to trend deeper into an easterly phase of the quasi-biennial oscillation here. Another very strong helper, if you want to put it that way, in terms of blocking high pressure. What it does is we've got strong east to west winds as opposed to west to east. West to east winds tends to help the polar jet stream strengthen further north, and the opposite takes place when you've got a strong east to west wind blowing at 300 HPA above the tropics. We've got that resistance, if you will, on the polar vortex here, and we've seen that. We've seen a strong warming taking place during the early and middle portion of October. We've seen it strengthen. However, like what I showed in my previous video, that there is two, in a sense, there is two polar vortexes. One in the stratosphere at the very top. We've also got the tropospheric polar vortex, which is in the lower portion of the atmosphere that influences our weather. That's very weak at this moment in time. and that is another pointer in the right direction. Finally, where I think could be key in terms of flipping and giving the atmosphere the kick it needs in terms of bringing bitterly cold weather towards the UK is the Madden Julian Oscillation. It has been in unfavourable territory during October and even into the start of November, with it going through Africa and the Indian Ocean. But if you notice here, week 1 and week 2, we continue to see it progressing eastwards through the continental maritime region and in through the Pacific Ocean here. And if you look finally at the 500 millibar height anomaly chart here, this is the GFS ensemble, so this is the collection of 51 members of the model. We are now starting to see the model respond. With the area of high pressure that we've got currently over the UK and over the near continent, the modelling is trending more and more towards that back and westwards here. And if you see here, skipping through the loop, this is North America, Greenland, the UK. We've got, of course, a mean and strong area of high pressure centred over the British Isles. If I skip through this loop here, folks, this is the 5-day increments, by the way, you watch the trough, or the ridge that's currently over the UK, start to back and retrograde west, northwest over the Atlantic and up into Greenland here, folks. That is then going to start to correlate to a deepening trough that is, first of all, settles over Europe, then starts to back its way westwards here, and you can see that the model is now starting to go to that. When people were jumping in the cold theme, then the warm theme, the cold theme, I didn't want to say a thing because I've had this idea long before the models even sniffed at cold towards the end of November. Remember what I was saying? The key is you build your ideas, you have your facts behind you. You might be wrong, but at the same time, you might have something with credibility. You can see here as I skip through, this is the European view, that the area of high pressure eventually starts to build over the UK and then starts to kind of build its way westwards. Then the trough deepens over Europe, fills with cold air, and then we'll start to see that cold air back westwards in towards the UK. The problem that I've got and the concern that I've got is that the ridge of high pressure stays anchored too close to the UK. Now remember 2010 and 11 and 11 and 12 arguably seen bitterly cold winter weather. I believe it was in January, but it's the area of high pressure over the Atlantic stayed too close to the UK and actually in essence kept the very bitterly polar air on the other side of the North Sea. We've seen minus 18 in the Netherlands, for example, minus 18, minus 19 degrees. We've seen a brief spell of that cold coming into eastern portions of England where Holbeach reached minus 15 for the UK winter minimum that year. But the bulk of the cold stayed in the continent. My concern would be, in a sense, that area of high pressure doesn't shift west and north enough to allow that area of cold to move in here. And I'm running out of time because I'm only allowed 15 minutes on this. But I'll finally show you what the model is indicating in terms of temperature here anomaly. But very exciting times to come, folks, and I am starting to get more enthusiastic with regards to the overall setup. But look at how Europe turns very cold towards the end of November here. Strength cold, exact timing of when that comes in, all remains open to question. But I think the overall ideas that I've had for weeks now is starting to show merit. But we'll still wait and see what happens here. Hope you have a great rest of your Monday, and I'll be back in the next couple of days with more. Bye for now.